Solving quadratic equations. We've already learned a couple of ways to solve a quadratic equation. We learned about using factoring. After factoring, we learned about completing the square. And today, we're going to learn another method, taking the square root. Now, the good news is we've actually already learned how to solve an equation when taking the square root. There was a unit a while ago in our nonlinear functions unit, and we've already learned this, but now we're going to bring it back and add it to one of our methods of solving a quadratic equation. So let's begin. So let's write out a problem. Let's say we have x minus 2 quantity squared equals 25. So this is a quadratic equation, and we are going to use taking the square root. So our first step is, in this case, going to be to take the square root, because our goal is to get x alone. And we see that we can't really do anything with x because of that exponent, so we first have to get rid of the exponent 2, and you do that by taking the square root. So we take the square root of the left side, which means we also have to take the square root of the right side. And so square root and exponent, those are opposite operations. So these two undo each other. And so we are left with x minus 2. And on the right side, square root of 25 is 5. But then you have to remember that when you take the square root of 25, not only do you get positive 5, but you also get a negative 5. So that's how we get our second solution. And so we have x minus 2 equals also negative 5. Okay, and so now we'll solve each of those equations to get our two answers. So let's start with x minus 2 equals 5. So because there's no other multiplying or exponents involved, we can just rewrite the problem without an exponent. And parentheses. So now we add 2 to both sides, add 2 to both sides, and so we get x equals 7. So that's our first solution, x equals 7. Now on the other side, same thing, we can rewrite it. Oh, no, we don't want parentheses. We're going to rewrite it without parentheses because there's no multiplication or exponent involved. So now we're trying to get x alone. So x minus 2. So to get x alone, we have to add 2. And so we get x equals negative 3. Okay, and so we have our two solutions. X equals 7 and x equals negative 3. All right, so let's see another example of taking the square root. Let's say in this case, we have the equation 2x plus 4 quantity squared equals 36. Okay, so same thing, we're trying to figure out how to get x alone. And so we realize that in order to get x alone, we first have to get rid of the exponent. Okay, so let's start. So we get rid of the exponent by taking the square root of each side. Okay, so the square root and the exponent 2, remember, are opposite operations. They undo each other. And so then on the left side, we are left with 2x plus 4. And on the right side, square root of 36 is 6. But as we said before, when you take the square root of 36, you also get negative 6. And so we also have this equation, 2x plus 4 equals negative 6. Okay, and so now we solve the equation. So the first step is to subtract 4 from each side. And that leaves us with 2x equals 2. All right, next step, 2x, so that means we got to get rid of the 2, so divide both sides by 2. And now we get what we wanted. We get x equals 1. So the first solution to this equation is x equals 1. Now, in the other equation, we have 2x plus 4 equals negative 6. So the idea is the same. We're trying to get x alone, so we subtract 4 from each side. And so we get 2x equals negative 10. And 2x, so we got to divide both sides by 2. And that gives us x equals negative 5. So the two solutions to this quadratic equation are x equals 1 and x equals negative 5.